Good morning. I am Bev Curtis with Bev and Company at House of Brokers Realty, and welcome to Breakfast with Bev this morning. I have the pleasure this morning to be with a very dear friend and colleague, Nathan Jones, and he is with the Nathan Jones Law Office. And Nathan, would you mind kind of telling us a little bit about your background this morning?
Sure, absolutely. So, as Bev said, I'm Nathan Jones with Nathan Jones Law, and I'm an estate trust and business attorney here in Columbia. And I've lived here for the last 14 years, went to undergrad and law school at Mizzou. And so we kind of put down some roots here and opened up my own firm after working at another firm a couple years ago.
He's got great digs here too, by the way. It's like really trendy. Looks great. So the reason I'm here with Nathan this morning is kind of, as you all know, every Wednesday we try to pick a topic that we feel like is going to be a very big benefit to our friends and to our clients. And so I think one that's kind of a tricky topic that a lot of people get a little bit confused on is basically kind of the legal side of real estate and how you take title to a property. And that's where I think the advice of a good attorney such as Nathan, he specializes in this area, is a big value to a lot of folks. So this morning we're going to kind of start off with, Nathan, is that let's say I just closed on a house. And I'm sitting there at the closing table, and one of the closing brokers said, "So, Bev, how do you want to take title to this property?" And I kind of look at them with the deer in the headlights look saying, what are my options? And so would you kind of explain to us from the legal aspect of when you take title, what does that mean, and what are the options, and what should you be thinking about in making that decision?
Right. So a lot of people don't give much thought to this. And Bev and I were talking just a few minutes ago that how you take title at the closing room table really matters a lot. And so there are a few ways that you can take title. The first one would be, let's say it's a married couple and you've got a husband and a wife. They're typically going to take title to their property as husband and wife, which is usually what they might want. But it gets a little trickier when you have people who are not married. Then there really are kind of two options. One is they could be joint tenants with rights of survivorship. The other one would be that they're just co-tenants. And so there's a really big difference there. Let's say we have... Can you
kind of tell us what those mean?
Absolutely. So let's say you have two owners and you've taken ownership as just co-tenants, which is the default way. If it doesn't say otherwise, that's the default way that two non-married people take title.
Okay.
If something were to happen to one of those owners, let's say one of them gets in an accident or they're an older person and they pass away, half of that property, maybe it's land, maybe it's a house, but half of that property is going to be stuck in the court system for somewhere between 7 and 13 months.
Wow.
And so people don't realize that if the two of them had just, when they took title, the words joint tenants with rights of survivorship, if those words with rights of survivorship had been added, they would have avoided 7 to 13 months worth of court.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
That's very valuable information, guys, because I think a lot of us just go about everyday transactions and don't think about the what ifs that happen in life.
Right.
Okay. So then I know there's kind of that ugly word about probate.
Right.
And how to avoid probate. So can you kind of explain what probate is and
Absolutely.
How do we want to try to avoid that?
So about a third of my practice is actually guiding people through the probate process, which means I've got a lot of practical knowledge about probate and have gotten really good at counseling clients about how to avoid it. So they don't have to come visit me and go through the probate process with
Why
me.
do we want to avoid it?
So the biggest reason that you want to avoid probate is, it's a court system. So it's public records.
Okay.
Most people have heard of probate and they just know enough that they want to avoid it, right? Most people don't talk about probate in a really happy way. And the biggest reason would be that it costs a lot of money to go through probate and it takes a lot of time. So I talked a little bit earlier, if half a property had to go through the court system. That's probate. Now, 6 to 13 months is the average time for probate here in Boone County. And you're not allowed to do it any faster than that. And then how much it might cost really depends on how complex things are and how much money is going through probate. But if let's say just a house goes through probate here in Boone County, you'll be looking at generally a minimum of $8,000 to $10,000 in probate costs and fees.
Wow.
Right. So, we talked about what ifs. My job is to think of the what ifs for my clients.
Right. The life happens.
That's exactly right. And so the bad news about probate is that it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time to go through it. The good news is with a little bit of planning, it can be avoided entirely.
So kind of tell us then, how could we avoid that painful process?
Sure. So the first way would be if you owned property with another person and it was set up in a way that it was with rights of survivorship. If something happens to one of them, the other becomes the sole owner of the property.
Okay.
Now, what we're more worried about would be, what if there's only the one owner? Or what if something happened to both of the owners at the same time?
Okay.
So you think about a husband and wife, and they might be worried about a joint accident or something like that. And they've got kids to take care of, all of that, exactly. And so there are really two ways that you can avoid probate in that circumstance. And the first one would be with something called a trust. Now, Bev, you've heard of trusts before,
yes,
right?
And actually you prepared ours, yes.
And you've got clients that have trusts.
Yes.
And a lot of people have heard of a trust, but not that many people know exactly what it is.
Right.
And so a trust is basically a document that you set up, and it becomes kind of what I call a basket. A basket that you put things into, okay? And one of the things that you can put into that basket would be your house. You put your house and bank accounts and things like that in this basket. Mm-hmm. And then we just say that if something happens to us, the people who set up the trust, we're going to have a family member or a banker come in and be the trustee.
Okay.
And their job is basically to collect everything that was in the basket, sell a lot of it, and then distribute the money that comes from that to the heirs that you chose in your trust. Sometimes that's kids, and we might hold that money in the trust for them until they get a little bit older.
Right, maybe 18, 21, whatever the age is that you decide.
That's exactly right. You get to choose in that trust. And the beauty of that trust is that nothing in it goes through probate, because your trust is the owner, and a trust can't die. So its assets never have to go through probate.
Okay. And then there's also, kind of tell us a little bit about the will part. A lot of people say, I have a will. Okay, so you have a will, but when the rubber meets the road, does that really make a big impact? Right.
So there are a lot of misconceptions out there about wills, and wills are a really important document. They do some really good and important things, but one of the things that they do not do is avoid probate. So I hear all of the time people will say, I've got a will, so I'm going to avoid probate. And that really couldn't be any further from the truth. So a will simply is pretty much just a roadmap through probate.
Okay, so I have a question. If you have a will, do you typically have a trust? Do you typically have both, or not necessarily?
Sure. So if you have a trust, you typically have a will.
Okay.
And that's just because sometimes we talked about putting things in that basket, right?
Right.
If something slips through the cracks, you have a will there as a safety net.
Gotcha.
And it's there, and you read through your will, and it would say that your trust is the beneficiary of your will.
Okay.
And so it catches onto those assets and puts them into your trust for you.
Okay. Wow. Now, see, guys, there's lots of ins and outs that probably a lot of us didn't know, and very valuable information. And obviously, if you have questions about your personal situation, you definitely need to seek the advice of a good attorney. Is there anything else, Nathan, that comes to mind that would be good information for one to know, other than the obvious topics that we just talked about? Is there anything that you would say that needs to be done in addition to this, or something that maybe one hasn't thought about? Does anything else come to mind?
I would say that a house is a really important decision, right? And it also becomes a lot of people's largest asset.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so, but for some reason, we just don't think about it that way. And you're just living in it, right? And it's kind of part of your day to day. And so you don't think about it the way you would a retirement account. But for so many people, it is seriously one of our largest assets. And so it's important to work with a professional to find that asset, to buy correctly, right? Mm-hmm. But then it's also important to think about it as an asset moving forward, and work with someone like myself or another estate planner to make sure that this asset that hopefully is going up in value over time is going to be there for your kids someday.
Right.
And that we're not going to have to mess around with a year worth of court to get it to them.
Yeah. Well, I think the moral of the story here is that everyone should kind of self-evaluate kind of what your position is and what assets that you own. And basically, you need Nathan to help you protect the assets that you acquire, because it takes a lot of hard work and sweat to go out there and get those assets. So you certainly want to make certain that you're covered. And you definitely, especially if a life event happens that's unexpected, you want to make certain that your loved ones are fully protected. And I have to say, Alan and I have been more than happy with Nathan's services and have used you on a number of different things. And he's kind of our go-to guy when it comes to that type of thing. And so if you do have a situation or want to kind of analyze what your personal situation is, feel free to reach out to Nathan and give him a call, because I have to say, I found he is truly an expert in this area and will give you wonderful guidance. And I have to say, peace of mind. For me, it's all about the peace of mind to know that, it's kind of not, if something's going to happen, it's the when something's going to happen in life that you're covered and you've got everything, all your ducks in a row. So, okay. Well, Nathan, thank you so much this morning for joining us. Cannot thank you enough for your time and your expertise to share. And we hope that everyone found this to be very beneficial. And once again, if you have questions in regard to this area, feel free to reach out to Nathan and he will take very good care of you. So thanks again this morning for joining us. We look very forward to seeing you next week, and have a wonderful week and try to stay cool. Take care.